Hi, this is Paul Green, and welcome back to Martial Logic. It's been a while since I've had a chance to do one of these episodes. We've been really busy, and and I've actually been under the weather this week and haven't felt really well. I have a lot of allergies, acting up, and I had to take my contacts out, and so I'm having problems seeing and everything else because my eyes got really irritated by them, and a lot of red eye and a lot of that kind of stuff. So hopefully I get through this, but I may have to put my glasses on, to read some of the stuff that we're going over, which I don't like doing because I don't like looking, like a 70s cult leader. I'll show you what I mean. Boom. That is not good. No, no. Um, I won't be asking you to follow me to any, made up towns in South Africa or anything. South America rather, but those don't look good. No, they don't. They don't. But anyway, what we're going to be talking about today and next week as well, because this is kind of a big one, and I'm going to break it down into two different shows. But we're going to be talking about what I call the rule of randomness. Now, when we do this in the book, it may actually be broke down into two chapters. I haven't really decided what I want to do, but I do want to get the information out there to you. We're not going to, give you everything, as as we talked about before. This is, kind of a teaser, for different chapters in the book that I'm working on. If I give it all to you there, then why would you want to buy the book to read it? But we'll, go over enough, that'll be pretty interesting. Um, One of the problems that I see in various martial arts, is there seems to be people out there that have certain dogmas and doctrines that they're selling to people, and they'll take things like statistics and bend them and manipulate them, or just misread them to prove their dogma. And a lot of times it's not that they're even doing it on purpose, but it's not a good thing. There's people out there that would like you to believe that that this thing, just because there's some statistic that says this thing is more likely to happen to you, then you shouldn't train other things, um, and everything, and that's bullshit. Because especially if they're doing like a national program. Now, if it's just somebody in your area doing something, for people in your area, and they're not traveling around and all that other kind of stuff, it's a little bit different. That I can see, and you'll understand why as we get more into this. But it just what we're going to talk about isn't so much awareness and avoidance and that type of thing, because there are pre-indicators and things for like active shooters. There's stuff that universities can do to predict who's most likely to do that, and get them off campus, and and that type of thing, or at least they're doing that now. The University of Oklahoma has a really good program for that. I had a chance to to stay up there on campus for I think in October, about probably like 3 or 4 days, and do some teaching up there for their police department, and and was really impressed with some of the programs that they have up there. I'm actually going back in June for a week and a half to do some work for their the police department, and their what they call them, community service officers. Um, and but so there are things like that are kind of predictable, that you need to look at and pay attention to. But we're talking about like one-on-one fighting. But before we do that, that's actually going to be more the next episode or whatever. I want to kind of set the stage and show you how some of these things can be manipulated. And I want to talk to you about statistics and alternate realities. First of all, one of the things that kind of peeves me the most recently, more than in the past, because I understand it more, is the term reality-based martial arts. That's this some systemized thing, that's reality-based martial arts. First of all, everyone thinks that their martial art is reality-based. I seriously doubt you're going to go into some, dojo or some, gym or whatever, and ask about their training, ask if it's reality based, and they tell you something like, no, we only train for, to fend off flying butt monkeys from Uranus. No, I mean, everybody thinks that what they do is reality based, whether it is or it isn't. But the fact is reality based is bullshit. Reality based martial arts is bullshit. Because the term itself is bullshit. Originally, it was based on the term reality-based training, which is actually really good, but it means train for your reality, and it's with the understanding that depending upon where I live and what cultural stuff that I'm dealing with, the situations that I put myself in because of the decisions that I make, my reality may be different than your reality. The reality of somebody in one state or in one or even like a different town in a state, like if let's say in Alabama here, I live in a small town, a very small town that's a suburb of Huntsville. My reality and my worries about certain types of violence are going to be much different here than someone who lived 20 minutes down the road in Huntsville. Or if you lived in any of the bigger metropolitan areas here, Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile, your life is going to be different there than mine is here. So, for me to sit there and say that, like, for example, if I were to say something like, well, man, knives aren't a huge problem in Alabama, and that's bullshit. You shouldn't train for that. Well, people in Birmingham get stabbed every day. Just because nobody gets, something happens to someone here doesn't mean that it's not happening to someone much more somewhere else. And and that's a big problem. You could even have people in the same training hall that one person's reality is different than another person's reality over here, and they're in the same building because they live in a more violent neighborhood. Maybe they ain't got as much money to live in the rich neighborhood. So they got to deal with a lot more stuff than what you got to deal with. Whereas, something, you might be looking at might be completely different. So for one person to dictate and try to systemize what everyone's reality is without knowing these people, knowing where they live, knowing what the background is, knowing who they hang out with, or anything else is bullshit. It's just bullshit. There is... And what kills me the most about it is the chest thumping. And I'm a firm believer, in hard training, and in dynamic training, gear up, in some of your classes, wear your red band suit or your Spartan gear or whatever kind of gear you got and do it. It's great for stress inoculation. I think that stuff is great. But it's these same, chest thumpers that, go around, all about, have you pressure tested your techniques? Well, first of all, you can't pressure test a technique. There's no such thing as a legitimate test for a technique, because the one thing that's true about techniques that's completely 100% fact, which you can't get around, is that under the right circumstance, they all fail. And if you're talking about doing, well, did you pressure test your technique? Well, more than likely, you look at it, they, blew their chance for a legitimate pressure test when they told the person to punch to throw to start the pressure test. Because it's not realistic if you know what they're going to throw before they throw it. Because that shit don't happen. Second of all that would prove, I know you can pressure test a system, but you can't pressure test a technique. All that would prove is that technique works with you doing it on this dude. It doesn't prove that it would work on a much bigger person that didn't feel pain. It doesn't prove that it would work on someone who had more skill than you. And it doesn't prove that it would work if you put someone else in your place to do the technique on the same dude. It doesn't prove any of that. That's why I say you cannot pressure test a technique. So, stop all the smug bullshit, and get real. I mean, seriously. One person, you cannot systemize reality because reality is subjective. And that's just a bullshit term. It's just flat out bullshit. I mean, I cannot stress that enough. And, and the thing about pressure testing, once again, that goes into randomness. One person could attack you different than somebody else. And, when you put somebody else in that situation, you make that stuff random. Any technique can fail. Any technique can be successful on any given day. There are some that are more likely, obviously, you wouldn't want to do jump spin kicks or some, BS like that. But, you know, to say that, you've pressure tested this technique, it's always going to work. No, you haven't. No, you don't. None of that's true. So, just to show you how some of this kind of randomness is, we want to talk about some of this stuff. What I want to, draw your attention to, and in the book we'll actually, have this printed out where, everybody can see it and whatnot, and read it because it's not a patent on it; it's just data. Is the Uniform Crime Report, the most recent one, and that's where we're going to start talking about data and statistics and how, every statistic and all data has a flaw somewhere. So when somebody brings, something out and says, well, by God, my stuff is this stuff and everybody else is crap, because this thing says it is. Well, the thing probably doesn't say that. You just have to know how to read it, and get to it. And I want to do this to illustrate how the reality from one person state to state may be, quite different from the reality of another person, within their state. And, it just it matters. Don't want to have to break out the cult leader glasses. Unfortunately, sorry. Don't nobody be terrified or nothing. But just to give you an idea, and this is the most recent Uniform Crime Report. It's available to the public. It don't cost anything. You can go on the FBI site, and look up, the UCR Uniform Crime Report. And the exact one that I'm looking at is Table 22. This software, I'm learning it. I can do more with it than what I used to, but I still don't know how to do everything. Somebody else, might be able to put this right on the screen and you can do it along with it, but I'm just not, that inclined, with this software to do so. But just to give you an example, make sure. Okay, got to check something really quick. Just to give you an example. In Alabama, the total aggravated assaults last year were 11,142. Firearms reports were 1,610. Knives or cutting instruments of some kind were 1,679. Not much difference there. You look at other weapons, and other weapons basically means that they can pick up any damn thing they see. 5,509. Personal weapons, which mean, unarmed, like, just, duking up, 2,344. In most states, the weapon that you're most likely to be attacked with is any damn thing they can get their hand on at any given time. In some states it's different, but, my point is that, that's random. It's weapons of opportunity is the most common weapon. It's not knives and it's not guns. You go and you look at Alaska, just to kind of run through some of these real quick. You're more likely, actually the most likely assault that you're able, would deal with in Alaska is being punched in the face. You're more likely to be punched in the face than you are for somebody to use a weapon at hand, and much more than a firearm or a cutting instrument. Your firearms are at like 549. Your knives and stuff are like 597. Your personal weapons are, 1,199, much higher, and other weapons. So you see right away in Alabama, you're most likely to be attacked with any damn thing they can pick up. But in Alaska, you're more likely to be punched in the face. So your reality in Alabama is different than what it is in Alaska. You look at, some of these other ones, Arizona, you're just as likely to be shot as you are anything else. The actual one would be other weapons, which is the, weapons of opportunity, and everything else, but it's not that much higher. Personal weapons, other weapons, and, firearms are all over 4,000, cases. They're all, pretty close in numbers. You go and you look at Arkansas, you're much more likely to be punched in the face than anything else. And if you're not punched in the face, you're more likely to be shot than you are, for weapons of opportunity. So, you have 3 states right there. Well, no, actually 4. And the reality is different in every state so far. You get California, where California, the most likely thing is weapons of opportunity. It's just barely more than personal weapons. You look at, let's see, Colorado, all the numbers are actually really, really similar. You could say you're just as likely to be shot, stabbed, punched in the face, or a weapon of opportunity than anything else. So in every one of those states, you have a different reality reflected. You could go down to Connecticut. Connecticut, every one of them is very similar. You're least likely to be shot, there than you are to be anything else. It's more likely to be a weapon of opportunity, but not much. Delaware, doesn't have a lot of crime, but the whole state has less than 1 million people. There it's more of a weapons of opportunity. District of Columbia, believe it or not, people think about people getting shot there. No, it's actually other weapons, but not much more than knives or cutting instruments. Knives and cutting instruments there for that population is actually very high. Florida, random weapons. Georgia, is not nowhere near as likely. It's actually pretty even between other personal weapons, other weapons, and firearms. But there's not a lot of knives. Hawaii, there wasn't a single report made of a crime committed with a firearm. But once again, weapons of opportunity were much higher than anything else. And it varies. Like I said, most states it's going to be any damn thing they can get their hands on. You might as well just call that the miscellaneous pile. But once again, you see that reflected there. So where's the flaw in these studies? Now, I will say, if you wanted to go into this and find things, this is just data. It's not so much of a statistic. But you could do things like find out which state's the most violent. So far, from what I've seen, it's Tennessee. 1 out of every 206 people there is likely to be, the victim of an aggravated assault, whereas just a state that borders them, it's closer to 1 out of every 1,000 in Kentucky. But, this is just, some of the things you can look at and play with. But you'll see in each state, one is more likely than the other one, and it's not the same nationally. But now, let's say if you were to look at a list of what it showed nationally, they would have something, like, oh, nationally, gun crime or whatever agenda that they're trying to push. But if you break it down by state, you would see that it varies. Some states you're more likely to get punched. Some states you're more likely to get stabbed. Some you're more likely to get shot. But most states, it's just whatever the hell they can get their hands on to hit you with at any given time. And that goes into randomness. If you lived in one state, your reality is going to be different than the other one. And within that state, as we talked about earlier, somebody that lives out in a rural area is going to have a different reality than somebody that lived in a city. Now, we talked about all data and statistics have a certain flaw. The Uniform Crime Report. So where's the flaw in it? Well, if you use it right, there's good things that you can use it for, and I use it. But the one flaw that they do have in it is that the Uniform Crime Report features only assaults and things that are reported to law enforcement. So those that were not reported to law enforcement, aren't there. And in actuality, I would venture to say that the highest in every one of those states would probably be personal weapons, which is unarmed. Because if someone uses a weapon on you and you're really injured by it, you're probably likely to go to the hospital or an ER for something like that. And if that happens, it's going to be reported to law enforcement. But, when I was bouncing, I probably saw easily over 100 fights and, break out. And they were usually just maced and tossed into the street, and law enforcement wasn't called. I would say if you were to say for every, probably for every like 100 fights, um, less than 10 were actually reported to law enforcement. So I would say that that number would be much, much higher. But that would be the flaw in that one. But as we said, I'll give you another example. I teach out in Arizona once a year. And I teach in Phoenix, which is a very large city. It's the nation's sixth largest city. But then I teach down in Tucson too, and Tucson itself isn't a small city. But when I teach at the academies there, or the academy there, we get a lot of law enforcement, that come to it that are south of that are more towards the Mexican border, and there are these really really small border towns. And just to illustrate what I'm talking about, even within the same state, um, you know, we were just kind of covering tackles, and defenses against them. Somebody trying to get you on the ground, and which there was a study that actually goes into that, where it basically said 52% of all police officers have had somebody try to take them to the ground. Now, there's problems with that study, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But up in Phoenix, we're going over tackles, and and every officer had in class had somebody try to tackle them and take them to the ground. So they really wanted to learn those techniques. But when I was down in Tucson, we had like more of these guys, from these smaller towns, in that general area, and a lot of them had never had anybody try to tackle them. They were actually surprised that it was getting taught, because that wasn't part of their reality. It wasn't something that they see a lot. Even though yada yada yada, there's a statistic that says this and that, but it wasn't a reality for them. Well, I teach a national program, and at some point, may even go international. So we have to look at the reality of all of it, and I'm going to discuss that a little more, in part two. But my point is that it wasn't a big deal, because I understood, and and those officers understood that reality is, what the problem that you deal with here may not be a problem over here. Each person has their own reality of what they have to deal with. What the types of crimes and the type of criminals that a department like Phoenix would have to deal with would be completely different, and a lot of times, than say like Tombstone, who just deals with a lot of drunken tourists. In that area, a small four-man department. There's just not a lot going on down there. But even within the state, even within the same state, you could have different things. And everybody that come to the class, they enjoyed it. Said good things about it. But it just, the reality is just a little bit different, and that's fine. But you have to understand that, and when you understand that, it's not a big deal. Especially when you gear your programs towards it. And like I said, we'll talk more about that next week. But so once again, the reality in south of Tucson is going to be a little bit different than the reality in Phoenix. It doesn't mean that somebody from the Phoenix area can't go to Tucson and raise some hell, and bring some of that crunkness down there, and cause some problems, and them have to deal with it. But it's just not something that they deal with all the time. And now going back to that study, I don't have it in front of me. I thought I had it bookmarked where I could just go to the page and read it off, but I looked through my bookmarks and it's missing. I don't have it, but I do remember a lot from the study. It was a study that Caliber Press did, and Caliber Press did. It was either 2001 or 2003. I'm not sure. I'll have to go find that again, but I'll have it for you in the book. But it basically, they had the question of how many fights go to the ground. What's the percentage of fights that have to go to the ground? This was specifically done for law enforcement, but I believe it was 1,400 law enforcement people that filled out a questionnaire of just the people that just came to their class. that they did all over the United States, and you can already kind of see the flaw in it already. But um, it just what they come up with was that 52% of all police officers had someone try to take them to the ground. Out of those 52%, 60 were successful. Um, what I think the actual numbers, the way it shook out, depended upon how you look at it, um, somewhere between 16 and 32% was the actual numbers um, of all the fights that go to the ground, which flies in the face of a lot of BJJ type people that try to preach that all fights go to the ground so they can get you in there to the mat so they can get your money. It basically disproved everything they said. As because they never did a study, they were just saying that shit. But so we know that all fights don't go to the ground, and what the solution that they came up with that garnered with the study, I personally felt was correct, and I felt it was spot on. That that you need to know some escapes from the ground, and some defensive striking and things like that. But it's not something you want to go overboard with or anything like that. And I think that's true. But with any study, there's going to be flaws, and especially a national study is going to be extremely flawed. Every one of them, for the same reasons that we spoke about, the same reasons that we went over those crime reports on the Uniform Crime Report. Um, one person's reality is different from that of another. One things that weren't asked, on the questionnaire, for that study, is what was the physical appearance of the officers that were attacked. Because an officer that looks like he can melt your face off is going to be less likely to be attacked, than say Barney Fife. What was the physical makeup of them? How many of them were female officers? What was the metropolitan area or the area that each officer was from that was interviewed? It was never broken down like that. Because once again, we know that it can vary even inside of a state, and it's definitely going to vary in national. I mean, what if they were doing a class, let's say in New York City, and these people had like a specific thing to deal with, but they had 300 people in that class, and some other area that they went to only had like 2 from each department. You know, that is going to greatly affect things on a questionnaire. What we don't know what that is. So there are a lot of things that could bias this thing or the other. But those are some of the flaws that you would run into, and some of the things that would happen with these variant statistics. But the main point ringing home, as you start to get to the rule of randomness, each person's reality is different from from another, and it can vary greatly. So to try to systemize it and have specific techniques, and this is this, and when you can't modify them, and you've got to learn it this way, like you see in like so-called traditional martial arts, or even reality based or whatever. Anytime you try to systemize anything like that, you're doing somebody a disservice if you're doing it nationally. Where they have to learn this technique, this technique, this technique, to get this next level of yada yada yada, and someday they can be king lizard of whatever. That it doesn't work as a training model. It's just not accurate, because it doesn't reflect the needs of every single individual, whose needs could greatly differ. So that term to me is crap, and it is deeply offensive, and I just don't buy it. And people that come up with these different statistics to say this thing happens, da da da. You can find some flaw in every one of those, or some type of a confirmation bias or anything else. But that's what I want to talk to you about. Today. This video went a little bit longer than I like to do them. But we got a big one next week, and I hope you're here to see it. I just wanted to set the stage, for this whole thing, about one reality versus the next. And we're going to go into it a little bit deeper and get a little bit more specific. There's some actual fight film that you'll get to watch, and we hope to see you. And so have a great day.